Alrighty, good morning there, everybody. It's Ashley. Hopefully, you guys are having a great week so far. I know my week has been obviously pretty busy. It's already Thursday. Can't believe we're heading into the weekend. But anyway, hopefully, you guys are having a great week and have got good plans for this weekend. I think here it's supposed to be sunny, so I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully, getting some time outside. So, hopefully here we'll get it through all this stuff in the next 30 minutes. We're going to be talking about strength training techniques. I know we've touched upon before the importance of strength training, so this is more focused on, I'm going to go over that briefly in case you've missed that video, but if you have, go back, watch that video, because that's an awesome, important video talking about why everybody needs strength training. Today we're going to be focusing more on specific terms, specific things we should be focusing on when we're doing strength training, so that way obviously it's beneficial and you're less likely to get injured. So obviously strength training is also called weight training, resistance training. Doesn't really matter what you call it. It all sort of does the same thing, which is it challenges your muscles with a stronger than usual counterforce. So obviously our normal muscle movement, we're moving around. There's some form of force being placed upon our muscles which allow us to move. So when we're doing some form of strength training, we're causing them to have a higher load than normal, which is what causes tiny tears in the muscle tissue. These tears are normal and they're actually important because as they heal, they actually make your muscles stronger. So the key thing here to keep in mind in order to achieve this, typically you need some form of either heavier weight or resistance band. You need some form as far as longer duration or higher intensity in order to see this continual progressive change in a positive direction. So the nice thing about strength training, it has a lot of benefits that a lot of people don't realize. And this is, it increases obviously your muscle mass, but it tones your muscles. It actually strengthens your bones because of the force of gravity, of having to actually do some form of exercise to exercise your muscles. You're going to actually increase your bone strength because it causes them to become more dense, which is good as you age. And then the big thing that a lot of people really should be focused on is the fact that when you have more muscle, it helps you to actually have a higher metabolic rate. This is because it takes more energy for your muscles to function. So, this means you're going to be burning more calories at rest. This is why strength training is so key. And a lot of people don't realize when you're doing a program to help with fat loss, you actually need to incorporate some strength training because you would want to get rid of the fat, but you don't want to get rid of the muscle. And if you focus solely on like cardio without strength training, that's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to you're going to drop weight, but the question is, where is the weight coming from? Is it fat? Is it muscle? Most likely it's both. If you do strength training, this prevents that muscle loss, which is key because obviously you want to have muscle as you be able to do everything in everyday activities. But otherwise, as you're aging, you need more muscle. This is where strength training is so important. Key thing here, this is why we want to really dive in on the technique today, is because of the fact that if you don't have proper form, most likely you're not going to get the full benefits that you're supposed to be getting out of strength training, so that's part of it. But the big thing is it can lead to injury. And obviously if you're injured, you can't work out. And if you can't work out, then it starts this whole cycle of, you're not able to achieve your goals when it comes to health and your physical fitness. So that's why technique is so important, and I wanted to touch upon it today. Just as a reminder, so that way you're keeping this in your thoughts as we're talking about technique today, is that the Department of Health and Human Services recommends that all adults incorporate strength training of your major muscle groups, and we're going to break those down here in just a moment, at least twice a week. Twice a week. Unfortunately, most people don't designate time to this as much as they should. So according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, as of 2018, about 50% of adults engage in cardio exercises to the level that they should for the recommended amount each week. But only 30% of adults meet the weekly requirement for strength training. That's not a lot. I mean, that means 70% of us are not getting the strength training we should be getting. So, this is why it's so important, because we want to increase the number of people who are doing strength training, but we also want to increase the number of people who are doing it properly so they're not injured. So the key first step in understanding strength training is understanding muscles, because obviously that's what we're working out, right? We have a ton of muscles in our body, but with strength training, we're only focusing on basically the major muscle groups and some smaller muscle groups. So obviously your abdominals, your stomach. You have your adductors, which are the inside of your thigh. You have your dorsal muscles, which are the middle of your back, your shoulders, your arm extensors, your wrist extensors, your gluteals, which is your butt. You have your arm flexors, which is obviously when you bring your arm up. Your wrist flexors, your scapular fixers, which are your shoulder blades back here. Your thigh flexors, otherwise known as hamstrings. Your lumbar muscles, which is your lower back. Your calves, your pectorals, which is your chest muscles up here. Your quadriceps, which is the front muscles on your thigh. Your trapezii, which is your upper back. That's not your shoulder blades, but just a little bit more inside, closer to your spine. So if you're going to look at, that's obviously very, very detailed. And when you're doing certain exercises, you're going to actually be working multiple of these muscles all at the same time. So the key things you want to keep in mind when you're actually trying to design a routine is you want to focus on your arms, your shoulders, your chest, your back, legs, buttocks, and abdomen. So if you keep it to those core concepts, you're going to hit all the muscles that you should be. But I just wanted to let you know this is what you're actually trying to work on. So when we're talking about muscle contraction, there's actually two types. You have isometric contractions, which is where the muscle does not lengthen. So an example of this is pushing against a wall. So if you then have isotonic contractions, and this is where the muscle shortens and lengthens. The shortening phase is called the concentric contraction phase, and the lengthening phase is the eccentric contraction. So an example of this is if you're using a dumbbell and you are doing sort of something like a bicep curl. So where obviously as you raise the dumbbell coming up towards your shoulder, coming up, that's the concentric part where it's actually contracting. Your bicep is shortening because you're pulling it up towards you. Versus eccentric is when you're doing the lowering phase. And if you actually put your fingers on your bicep, and you can feel it just as you're doing it with no weight, as you lower your arm, you can actually feel the muscle lengthening. And if you pull it up, you can feel it contracting. So the big thing is when you're thinking of in terms of this, the eccentric contractions are mainly what give you sore muscles. Because as you're pulling, you're going to feel the tension. But if you lower it, and this is the key thing we're going to talk about speed as well, is that as you're lowering it, that's where you're actually trying to make controlled movements coming down. And that's the lengthening is where you're going to get that soreness from. The other big concept when it comes to muscle contractions are your joints, because obviously your muscles help you move your joints. So flexion is when you decrease the angle of a joint. So an example of this is when we're using the arm curl again, coming up, that's flexion, because we're flexing the muscle. So that is the concentric part of the contraction. We're decreasing the angle of our elbow joint. So extension, obviously, is the opposite movement. This is the eccentric contraction. So we're increasing the angle of the joint. So it goes, if you think of this is 180 degrees, we're coming up, that's 90, and we're coming even further. So that's where, when you're thinking about in terms of flexion, extension, and then obviously concentric and eccentric, there are different terms to describe the processes going on in the same movement. So they're compatible terms, if you will. So abduction is when we're moving a body part away from the middle of our body. So abduction means if my arm's, here at my side and I go up, that's abduction because I'm moving my elbow away from me. Adduction is coming back down. That's moving your body parts close towards your middle. So another example of this are leg raises. So if you're standing, and you lift your leg up to the side, and then you bring your leg back. That's where you're thinking of it in those terms. So compound exercises are those that involve more than one joint and often involve several large muscle groups. And this is what I was talking about a moment ago. This is where you're going to be doing different exercises. That way it allows you to work different muscle groups all at the same time. Versus isolation exercises are ones that only involve one joint and usually targets a specific isolated muscle group. So a great example of this is what I was just showing you with arm curls. So typically when you're doing arm curls, you're keeping, your elbows in line with your torso. And as you lower your arm, all you're focusing on is moving your elbow joint. Everything else is straight. Your shoulder doesn't move, your wrist doesn't move, your hand doesn't move. All this moving is your elbow up and down. So what we're targeting is the biceps. So that's an isolation exercise. Compound exercises would be something like a squat pull, where you're actually squatting down with a barbell and you stand up and you pull it up because you're working your back, your shoulders, your legs, all of it at the same time. So, a couple other terms that you need to know when you're doing strength training. We're talking about repetitions or reps. And this is like one completion of an exercise, like one chin-up, one arm curl, whatever you want to call that. A set is a select number of repetitions before you rest. So, for instance, there can be 8 reps in one set, or 12 reps in one set. The rest interval is the time between sets. So you can do 8 reps in one set and then rest, and then do another 8 reps and then rest. So that's where you start to build this exercise routine together. So 1 RM, or repetition maximum, is your personal best, or the most amount of weight or resistance you can use in a single exercise. So 12 RM, which is the most you can lift for 12 repetitions. So for instance, for an example on this, so going back to our bicep curl, that's an easy one for me to demonstrate on the video here. So 40 pounds times 12 RMs over 60 seconds would mean that 3 sets of 12 max arm curls with a weight of 40, and then you have a 60-second rest between sets. So that way it helps you to understand, as far as, we're going to talk about easiness and challenging as far as determining which weight you should be using. But it's important to keep track, because then you know if something's becoming easy, it's like, okay, then you start adjusting things, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. And so I just wanted to give you the basic terms so that way you know what I'm talking about when we get to that point. So the basis of weight training success is a combination of factors, and we often use the acronym FIT, F-I-T-T. And F stands for frequency of training. So this is how often. How often are you going to train? Usually we're talking about a weekly basis. Obviously the recommended amounts, at least 2 times a week. You can train more than that, but you should get at least twice. Intensity of training. How hard are you training every single time? Not every single time is going to be the all-out maximum when you're doing strength training. And then the time spent. This is the session time. How much time are you spending per training visit or training period? It depends on if you're working out at home or going to the gym. And then the types of exercises. Which exercises are you using? And speaking of types of exercises, I'm going to go over now which exercises target which area of the body. So focusing first on your chest. That's where we're talking about bench press, chest press, and push-ups. Push-ups are amazing for many reasons, because it actually works more than just your chest. Shoulders are overhead press, lateral raises, and front raises. So lateral raises is where your arms down straight at your side, you're coming up. Front raises, same movement, we're just going forward with it, because what that's doing is hitting different target parts of your shoulder. Biceps, obviously we were talking about bicep curls. Those are huge for that. Hammer curls, which are a little bit different. Rather than having your wrist facing up towards your arm, you turn your wrist from that to this. So that way, as you're coming up, it works your muscle a little bit differently. And then concentration curls, which are another variation. Triceps, your triceps extensions, whereas if you're, you got your arm up and then you're coming down, usually you're sort of bent over in order to be able to get the right pull against gravity. And then you have tricep dips, you have tricep kickbacks. You also, if you're working your back, you're going to do 1 arm rows. You can do back extensions, or a big one for everybody is lat pull downs. And then you see this with cable machines at the gym. So where you pull down, and that you're going to feel it right in your back. Abdominals, this is where you're going to get crunches, reverse crunches, wood chopping, which is a type of word twisting because it's hitting your obliques or the sides of your abdomens. And then pelvic tilts. And then your lower body, and this is huge because obviously our lower body is so strong because it's used to walking and all that. That's where you're going to have things like squats, lunges, leg presses, deadlifts, calf raises. And because of the fact that these muscles are so important and get used a lot, you can actually work these out a lot as far as intensity goes. Once again, we're not going to go necessarily more frequent, but it's important to make sure you're actually challenging yourself. So as far as which exercises you should be doing, it really depends on, obviously, what equipment and facilities you have available to you. And this doesn't mean that you have to go get weights, doesn't mean you have to go join a gym. Body weight exercises are great. It's just in how you incorporate them as far as being able to measure progress and then see improvement. Obviously, another big factor, your age, your current strength level, obviously your experience with strength training, and then your commitment level. So you want to always start with a short, simple program. Part of it is you want to learn the techniques properly, and then the other issue is you can increase. You have to have a baseline, so you need to know where you're starting from before you can even get to a longer, more detailed workout routine. The big thing here, if you're first starting out, you want to only choose 1 or 2 exercises for each muscle group in the upper body and 3 to 4 for the lower body. As I said, because our lower body is designed to help us move around by walking and all of that, it needs more work, if you will, than our upper body does. And most experts recommend start with your larger muscle groups and then focus on your smaller muscle groups. So what this means is you're going to do the full body movements, so like you're going to do chest and before you do biceps and triceps, because you're going to need your biceps and triceps to be able to do the chest exercises. So you want to make sure that you're not too fatigued, those muscles aren't too fatigued, so that way you can't complete the other exercises. Versus you do the chest exercises first. Those are going to be the ones that you primarily work. Yes, the biceps and triceps assist, but they're not actually getting the full workout that they're going to get when you then focus on the isolation of those. So the key thing to remember with muscles is that strength, size, and endurance is built on the overload principle. So this means that you're lifting increasingly heavy weights, or you're increasing the volume of work over a period of time. It's not going to be something that's instantaneous. When you're first starting, you're going to notice improvement fairly quickly, and you're going to be able to start adjusting things in a very short period of time, because obviously your muscles are, they are amazing because they adapt. Key thing here is that as you increase strength, increase endurance, and all of that, you're going to notice a slowdown in the improvement process. So there are several different types of strength training depending on your goals, and I'm going to go in a little bit deeper into them here, but just a quick list of them is strength, hypertrophy, strength endurance, and power training. So there's 4 main types, and it really depends on what you're looking for as far as your main outcome. So strength training uses the most amount of weight or resistance with the least number of repetitions and the longest amount of rest time. So this is built by doing neuromuscular system interaction between the nerve and muscles. And so you use heavier weights with fewer repetitions, because what this is doing is you're causing the muscles to have those tears, but it's almost not quite the heaviest weight you possibly can ever lift, where you can only do like 1 repetition. This is, you want to be able to do the full amount of repetitions, and you want to make it challenging, so it has to be a heavy weight. This is what's going to cause you to have more strength. So key thing to remember is you have to take adequate rest between each heavy load set, because otherwise you're not going to get the results you want, because you're not going to be able to complete the next set to the full repetitions. Hypertrophy, or muscle size training, uses lighter weights with more repetition and less rest time. So what this is doing is where you're going to have the lighter weight because you're using more reps though. So for instance, with strength training, you're going to go with a heavier weight, lower reps, so probably a minimum of 8 reps. With hypertrophy, you're going to probably go up to maybe 10 reps with a lighter weight, because obviously you want to be able to go a little bit longer, but you're taking shorter rest breaks. So this type of training helps with metabolic factors. So this is where you're going to see that increase in size. So this is why it's important to incorporate all of these in some way into your routine, because obviously you want to increase your strength. Obviously, part of doing strength training is you want to have nice defined muscles. So that's where you're getting the hypertrophy part, and then strength endurance. This is where you're going to have even less weight and even more repetitions with even less rest. So this is where you're going to have maybe 12 repetitions at a lower weight and even less rest in between. And so this is helpful with trying to get, obviously when you're thinking of, where great way to describe is running, because obviously you need to have the endurance for your muscles to contract and expand for the length of time. Same idea, except we're now doing it with weights. And this is where certain things, obviously you can't run your upper body, but this is where, in some ways, unless you have a specific reason you're doing strength endurance, this is where cardio actually does a really great job. You just have to focus on which parts of your body you're working on. And because, and sometimes with this, in muscle endurance, the repetition range can actually go up to 15 to 20. And this is why you're using a lighter weight, because you need to be able to lift that 15 to 20 times. And then you different number of sets, but usually 3 is the most common. So that's why, when you're looking at this, it's like, what is your goal really that you're trying to accomplish? Do you want more strength? Do you want to have more defined muscles? Do you want your muscles to be able to do the same type of motion for a longer period of time? So power training involves lighter weights and longer rests while concentrating on the actual speed of the lift. So this is where we're focusing on the rate versus the others. It's more of, the weight in the number of repetitions. So power training, you want to build strength first and then progress to lighter loads so that way you can perform faster or increase your contraction velocity. And this is something that when we're talking about contraction velocity, this is the speed at which the exercise is performed, and it has an influence on your training outcomes. So with strength training, where you're focusing on the actual wanting to increase the amount of weight you can lift, you're focusing on 1 to 2 seconds of the concentric, the actual pulling up, and then also 1 to 2 seconds on the lowering. So it's the equal balance as far as how fast you're actually doing the exercise. With hypertrophy, which is where we're focusing on muscle size, muscle definition, you're going to be doing 2 to 5 seconds on both the concentric and eccentric. So, and then with the endurance, it's 1 to 2 seconds on the concentric and eccentric. So, but obviously remember, this is with less weight, so you're going to be able to move a little bit faster. With power, it's less than 1 second coming up, and it's about 1 to 2 seconds coming back down, if you're looking at it from an arm curl perspective. So this is why it's so important to make sure that you know what you're doing as far as which your goal is, so that way you can know, A, how much weight you need to have, how many reps you're going to do, how fast you need to be able to move your muscles, and then the number of sets. And this is where obviously people get a little bit overwhelmed sometimes. They're like, oh my god, I gotta think of all these different things, right? Typically what you're first going to want to focus on trying to build some strength. Next, try to focus on muscle definition. And this is naturally going to occur. And we're going to get into this here in just a minute as why that is. But when we're first starting a strength training routine, and you want to do this at any point, you always want to warm up for at least 5 to 10 minutes before you start your routine. Same thing with cardio. You've got to get your body's muscles warmed up in order for them to be able to actually function during the exercise process without getting injured. So something simple as a brisk walk is enough to get things pumping. You want to get your blood flow moving and all of that. So the next step is obviously learning the proper technique for each type of exercise you're going to do. This is going to help avoid injury, but it's also going to help you get the maximum amount of results. So first thing to remember with any strength training thing is don't hold your breath. When you are lifting the weight, you want to breathe out. When you are lowering the weight, breathe in. You don't want to hold your breath. You will pass out. Okay, and then obviously if you actually have free weights, it's a good chance of having an injury because you could drop them on yourself. You want to keep your body aligned correctly. So obviously depending on what the exercise is, if you're standing, sitting, this is going to change a little bit, but keep in mind this is the general principle. You want to keep your feet straight, point forward. Think if you're locked into skis and the skis are on the floor. You want to keep them pointed forward. You don't, unless you're doing a specific exercise that targets specific parts of the body, like sumo squats, where your toes are pointed slightly outward. You want them lined up. So the next thing is you want your knees in line with your toes, so pointing in the same direction. When you're doing squats or something like that, keep in mind your knees should never go past your toes, and otherwise you're going to have a ton of knee problems. So you squat down far enough until your knees are in line with your toes, and then everything else comes from your hips area. is as far as your shoulders go. You want to keep them back and down. You don't want to be shrugging. That's actually going to place tension where you don't want it. So back and down. You want good form. Nice straight line across. You want to keep your ears in line with your shoulders. You don't want to be going forward. You don't want to be going backwards. You want a nice straight line. That's basically what you're trying to think of as you're doing this. You want a straight line because that's the natural alignment of your body. So this is going to help you make sure that you're not injured because you're following along, the natural movements. And you want to maintain a strong core. So this means keeping your stomach muscles tight. One way to do this is try pulling your belly button in towards your spine. So like sucking your stomach in. This is going to help keep your core stabilized. So obviously, once you've got the proper body alignment, you're remembering to breathe, you want to learn each exercise correctly. And so if you aren't sure what to do, big thing here, there's plenty of videos on the internet you can watch. If you go to a gym, ask someone. Obviously, there's people there who've been going there a while, and if you see somebody doing some exercise that you want to be able to do, and ask them how they're doing it. Obviously, monitor them, make sure they're doing good form. Usually, gyms have personal trainers that you can schedule a visit with, so that way you can, learn how to do the form appropriately before you go off and do it on your own. Big thing here when you're doing the actual movement of any exercise is you want to work the full range of motion of that particular joint you're working on, because if you stop, that's where you're actually going to cause more issues. You need to have slow, smooth movements, not only lifting but equally controlled descents. And as we talked about before, as far as this contraction velocity, it's a little bit different. Still, it needs to be controlled. You're not like going crazy with it. You want it nice and smooth and slow in relative terms as far as slowness goes. Because this is going to help you obviously see the improvement you want without having significant problems. Key thing here, and the other thing is, by having slow movements, you're not relying on momentum, which makes it easy, which makes you not get the benefit that you want. And then the other big thing is maintaining good form is if you're unable to do this, you need to either decrease the amount of weight you are using or decrease the number of repetitions. So that is something to keep in mind. If your goal is to get to 8 reps with a certain amount of weight and you're unable to do that, 8 reps is usually the minimum amount of reps you want to do. So if you can't get to the 8 reps, that means you're lifting too heavy. You need to lower the amount of weight you're trying to lift. So this is where, when we're choosing appropriate weight level, you want not too light, not too heavy. You want it to challenge you, but not overtax you is the big concept. So when you're first starting out, either use light weights or no weights. You want to learn the exercise appropriately, so that way when you do start adding weights, you're not doing it incorrectly, and that way you end up with improper form. So start with a weight that you can lift comfortably for about 12 to 15 times. Because this is going to let you know, okay, you can practice the form, that's not going to be too much. Keep in mind, if you can't do whatever the last 2 reps are of what you've set out to do, that's when you need to do a lighter weight. And the other big thing is that when you are trying to pick the right weight or resistance band, you're going to need different weights depending on different exercises. Obviously, when you're working larger muscles, you're going to most likely be able to do a heavier weight than if you're working isolated, focus on specific smaller muscles. And as you get stronger, you can gradually increase the amount of weight you're using. So when something feels too easy, and you're able to do 12 to 15 repetitions with a specific amount of weight, that's usually an indication that you can go ahead and go up in weight. So when you're ready to go up, only go up 1 to 2 pounds if you're working on your arms, and about 2 to 5 pounds for your legs at a time, because you don't want to go up too much. Or you can add another set of repetitions to your workout. And so, obviously still with the rest interval in between. But remember, once again, if you're adding weight, all the repetitions should be within good form. So just keep that in mind, and your targeted muscle should feel tired by your last 2 reps, but as I said, it shouldn't be so much that you can't complete them. Keep in mind, when you're first starting out, you want to stick with lighter weights for at least the first 3 to 4 weeks. And this is because it's going to help you learn good form as far as the technique, And even if you feel stronger after the first few workouts, don't increase your weights because of the fact that your body needs time to build enough strength so that way you don't get injured. So make sure you're sticking to, whatever the weight is, and then after the first 3 to 4 weeks, then start playing around with whether you want to increase weight, you want to increase repetitions, whatever that may look like for you. Because obviously if you lift too heavy before your body's ready, that's where you can get injured too. So, a lot of people now, it's like, okay, well, I have an idea, but what is your goal ultimately? Do you want to lose body fat and gain muscle? Or are you looking forward to just gaining muscle? You just want to have overall good health and muscular endurance? So how many reps and sets do you need to do to achieve this, right? So let me break it down in a way that's a good starting point. Obviously, everybody's individualized as far as what they can lift. So keep this in mind as far as if you're trying to lose body fat and build muscle, you need to use enough weight that's challenging to complete 8 to 12 reps and 1 to 3 sets. So obviously, if you're a beginner, you're going to do 1 set. If 2 to 3 sets for intermediate to advanced exercisers. So you want to rest about 30 seconds to a minute between each set, and then you want to have at least 1 day between workout sessions. Okay, and this means you're combining your strength training with cardio, because in order to get fat loss, you need to have both, and you also need to be in a nutrient deficit. So keep that in mind as well. Then for muscle gain, if you're focusing solely on that, you're not worried about having to lose any weight, you want to use enough weight that you can complete 4 to 8 repetitions in 3 or more sets with resting between 1 to 2 minutes per set. And you want to give about 2 to 3 days between your sessions. For beginners, you want to give your several weeks of conditioning before you try tackling this. This is what I was alluding to before. You want to focus on losing fat, gradually building muscle before you, if you're really trying to dive into, the buff muscle gain look, you want to wait until you've built up the conditioning to get to that point. Okay? As far as health and muscular endurance, use enough weight that you can complete 12 to 16 repetitions for 1 to 3 sets with resting about 20 to 30 seconds between sets. And you want to give yourself at least 1 day between workout sessions. Okay, so keep this in mind when you're trying to determine your goal. What is your overall health fitness goal? This will give you a baseline of where to start, and then obviously you tweak it to your specific needs. So when we're talking about all your major muscle groups, obviously there are a ton of different exercises, a ton of different pieces of equipment. And when we're looking at this, overlooking a specific part of the body can lead to not only posture problems, but muscle imbalances that can result in injury. So there are several ways to make sure you're working out all your major muscles. Some full body training programs, they train all major muscle groups in a session. So here, think of things like HIIT training or CrossFit style type workouts or boot camps, where you're doing all these different exercises and they're targeting the different areas. So then you have split systems, which is where you're doing alternating sessions for major muscle groups. So one day might be upper body focused, another day is lower body focused. And this is the common traditional style bodybuilding type workout. And when I say bodybuilding, I really mean strength training. It's not like unless you want to be a bodybuilder, you don't have to be, but that's something to keep in mind. And then another option, you can focus on major lifts types like squats, bench presses, deadlifts, the clean jerk, because these also focus on larger muscle groups in combination. And then you can do compound movements, which involves multiple joints of your body, and therefore you've got multiple muscles working at the same time. So examples of this could be like squats, because this involves your hip and knee joints, and your glutes, legs, core. Push-ups are really great, and this is what I was talking about at the beginning of the video, is that it hits your elbows, your wrists, your shoulder joints. It also works your chest, your arms, and your core. And if you are starting with push-ups and you can't do the regular push-ups on your feet, go ahead and start on your knees. You've got to build up strength. And that's okay. And that's something you want to get a mixture of pushing and pulling exercises. So that way you get the muscle balances of both the reciprocal muscles. So great examples. Obviously pushing exercises, as I mentioned before, squats, standing overhead presses, push-ups, dips, bench presses, barbell box step-ups, and glute bridges. Those are all pushing exercises. Common pulling exercises include rows, pull-ups, lat pull-downs. So when you think of this in all these different terms, there are plenty of different exercises. You can use cable machines, free weights, resistance bands, body weights. And so it just really depends on what you have available and what you like doing. And keep in mind, as you're in your routine, it's easy to get comfortable and fall into the habit of doing the same exercises and movements every single time. You don't want to do that. You want to change things up because you want to vary the equipment you're on, change up the intensity, alternate how you're gripping things because it works things differently, like palms down versus palms up. You know, when you're thinking like bicep curls, palms up versus palms down, totally different feel on your, especially your forearms on that one. And keep in mind, you want to start doing these changes about every 6 weeks or so, because this is about the time it takes to start seeing improvements. And then you want to change your routine so it becomes a little bit more challenging, a little bit more difficult again. So that way you're constantly providing your body with challenges. As I said, your body is an awesome machine. Your muscles adapt quicker than you think. So you want to give them something to challenge them. So as I mentioned, part of this is also changing up the number of reps, the number of weights, whatever, you know, the intensity, however you want to do it to make it more of a challenge for you. That's something that's absolutely critical. And another concept is that once you've gotten some experience, and you don't have to stop when you reach the end of the set. And this is something with the repping out or going to failure. That's, you might hear that term. And what this means is lifting until you can't do any more reps with good form for that particular exercise. And this is not something that you want to do when you're first starting out. It's not something that you want to do every single time you do strength training. It's something that you can do occasionally. Over time, you're going to see this improve as far as the number of reps, especially with the number of weight, the amount of weight or resistance. So it's very challenging. But you want to make sure, key thing here is have good form. Typically, if you're going to do some type of exercise to failure, and especially if you're using free weights, make sure you have a spotter so that way they can help you if you get to the point where you can't push the weight back up, or that way, or you can't catch the weight, you have someone to help you. Mind you, they're not going to help lift it for you. Basically, when you get to the point where your muscle is to the point of failure, you're unable to do it by yourself. Like, great one is chest presses, because people, obviously, you see the big barbell and, you know, pushing up. And so if you are unable to push up, by having someone else there just enough to take enough of the weight off that you're able to continue pushing up to get it into the rack, that's what their job's there, to make sure it doesn't fall on you. So that's why they're not going to lift it for you completely. So other big thing to keep in mind, if at any point you're doing any exercise and it hurts, like if we're, you know, not the muscle fatigue, soreness of, okay, this is, but it really hurts, stop. You know, you can try it again with less weight. You can try it again in a few days. Sometimes your muscles get stressed and they need a break from that particular exercise. Other big thing to keep in mind is when you're done, you need to cool down. A great way to do this is to stretch, because obviously you have worked your body. You put your body through an exercise routine. It needs to stretch. It needs to cool down, so that way it has time to recover and helps with that recovery. So you want to avoid exercising the same muscles 2 days in a row. So you need at least 48 hours between strength training sessions of a particular muscle group. So if one day is arms, the next day is legs, next day could be arms, next day could be legs, and you can do this rotation pattern. So if you're thinking of that, if you want to dedicate that much time to this. And a big thing I want to talk about is the process of overtraining, because there are signs of that, and I want to go over those so that way you know what those are. So if these start to happen, then you know what's going on. Problem if how we get to that point is you do too much intensity, too much volume, or too frequently, too quickly. So if you do any of those things, you can end up with some of this, which is ongoing fatigue or poor performance when you're actually trying to exercise. You can end up getting sick, like having viral and bacterial infections, because you're making your body run down. You have unintended weight loss. You have regular musculoskeletal injuries. You can have hormonal imbalances. For women, this might show up as irregular periods. You can have bone density loss. That's a big issue, because obviously that's not the point. We want to be able to create bone density. And you can have poor sleeping and eating patterns. So if you notice any of these are going on, and you've been doing some heavy, intense training, you might be overdoing it a little bit and need to cut back just a smidgen. Another big thing I want to talk about before we wrap up here, where I know a little bit over our 30 minutes, but I felt this was important. Misconceptions about strength training. So that often keep people from doing it. One is that they have to join a gym. And that, I'm telling you, is not the case. You don't need to join a gym in order to have good strength training. The best part about working out at home, it's free. And you can do it whenever you want. It's private. You don't have to go drive anywhere, spend time in the car. It's all there at home. And this is where, body weight exercises are great. Keep in mind, as you get stronger, you're either going to have to do more of them for a longer period of time, or you're going to need to start to tweak things a little bit. And this is where initially you might not need any equipment, but over time you might want to invest in resistant bands. Those things are amazing. They will give you a workout like you wouldn't believe. Key thing, remember, is learning form. You can buy weights. You can buy exercise balls, kettlebells, different things to have at home. Obviously, the more versatile the equipment is, the easier it is to use, and then that way you can use it for a lot of different things. So if you are going to go buy weights, some recommendations as far as the amounts. If you're getting a light set, for women, that's somewhere in that 1 to 5 pound range. For men, it's 5 to 8. For a medium weighted set, that's 5 to 10 pounds for women and 10 to 15 pounds for men. And then for a heavy set, that's 10 to 20 pounds for women and 15 to 30 pounds for men. So just keep that in mind when you're trying, because I know weights, if you're trying to buy them, they can be expensive. So keep in mind as you're progressing, where you might need to have weights. So don't invest in a ton of lighter weights, because you will eventually get to the point you need heavier weights. So just when you shop around, when you're looking for stuff like that. If you do go to the gym, keep in mind you're not expected to know how all the equipment works. You're just starting out, you're new at this. It's okay to ask questions. Typically, when you first sign up, you get a free orientation. Take advantage of that. Ask questions. How do I use this machine safely? And as I mentioned before, there are personal trainers. Just for one session, you can have them, okay, show me a workout routine that I can do, or show me how to use this, and this equipment. You don't have to keep going if you don't want to. If you do, that's fine. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. But at least you learn how to use the stuff. That's okay to ask those questions. Keep in mind, weight machines have a little bit more stability and require a little bit more coordination when you're doing it versus free weights. But the big thing here is the stability, because obviously with free weights, you're stabilizing everything. Some experts feel that you get better workout with free weights because of obviously you're actually having to stabilize the joint yourself. But obviously if you have joint problems, the machines are amazing for that, and you can still get a good workout with those. Good news is you don't have to use weights or machines. Anything that provides resistance can do the job. And as I mentioned, this is resistance bands, this is your body weight. So don't let these misconceptions hold you back. You can strength train however you see fit for your lifestyle, your routine. That doesn't make you have to be a bodybuilder. Obviously, the keys here are building a solid foundation. When you're first starting out, you want to get the fundamentals. Be consistent, be patient. Those are the key things. And if you're, as I said, if you're not sure of how to do a specific thing, look up videos for certain types of exercises. Consult with a personal trainer. Other big factors. Diet, nutrition are absolutely key when you're trying to do any sort of athletic program. Obviously, depending on your goal, if you're trying to lose weight or gain muscle, what your diet looks like is going to be a little bit different. And then if you have any medical problems, make sure you check with your doctor before you start doing any strength training program, because obviously you don't want to end up injured or ill from doing the program. And then the other thing I wanted to show you real quick was an example of a quick routine, just so that way you guys could see something. I'll try to hold it up close so you guys can see. So if you need to, go ahead and pause the video here so that way you can take note of this. But obviously list the exercises to start, the number of reps, and then whether or not you need weight. Typically, resistance bands or 5 to 10 pounds is a good starting point, depending on what you're able to do. But that's definitely something to keep in mind is as far as having a beginner routine. So I hope this helped you guys be able to delve into the idea of strength training as something that's really important, is really beneficial. Hopefully it gives you an idea of what to do as far as developing a safe routine. If you have questions, comments, put them below the video, send me a message, send me an email. I'd love to hear from you guys. But otherwise, you guys have a great rest of your week. Have an awesome weekend, and I will see you next week.